with the toxic fake news, and over time, we see that one stands up to be real and the other proves to be false. But we have to have it within ourselves to be able to distinguish between the two, and then cast out that which is toxic. But if you want to believe badly enough the other side is as evil as what you want to believe they are today, you can find any source in the world that will validate that over and over again for you. Never hearing another argument. That's your choice, to allow the toxic to overtake that which is nurturing. That's your choice. I'm hearing music. But anyway, I just had to make sure it wasn't coming from above, because I'm thinking maybe my time was being cut off. So what do? Well, we can go on a moral crusade and try to pluck out all the sources that write these horrible things. Good luck. First Amendment, that whole thing is going to get in the way of all of that anyway. We can cut ourselves off. We can create a society that is just going to completely cut ourselves off. That's not going to work either, because it always some nasty stuff gets worked in there somehow. So what do? We live with both. We live with both. And yes, it's upon each and every one of us, when we see something pretty bizarre about those whom we don't like, to take it upon ourselves to go look at the source and see if it's real or not. Do we want to be a part of the toxicity, or do we want to be a part of the healing? It seems to me that's the question for us as a society. But I think this parable speaks to something even deeper than that. And before the other can take place, I think this has to take place first. I see Jesus speaking about the human being and the individual. That we might try to cut ourselves off from any kind of impurity. I tried that once and was surprised to find out how alone I was. Everyone around me seemed to think I was judging them somehow. But the reality is God is not codependent. All right? God allows the wheat and the weeds to grow together. God allows that which is healthy and nurturing to grow with that which is toxic and destructive. And they grow side by side. And it's with maturity that you start to discovering the difference. But it's up to us, when we discover the toxic behaviors and the toxic beliefs and the toxic thoughts in our personal experience, it's up to us, when we see the difference, to let the toxic go. But some of us want to hold on to it because, well, that's our culture. That's our heritage. This is what my mama, grandmama, and granddaddy taught me once upon a time. Right? I can't, to let that go is to betray my family. Well, but is it true? Is it real? Is it toxic or is it nurturing? That's a choice that we have to make. The religion that we inherited, is it a religion that is one that's based upon God's anger and God's wrath and God's hate, and about who's right and who's wrong and which moral crusade and side I'm going to be on? Don't you find it at odd that the people who claim to worship the same God justify the fact that they're killing one another? Well, what's going on in that battle within our own lives, you see? I know things today at age 60 to be very real and very nurturing. And when the things in my life and in my thoughts are still toxic, it's obvious about it, and I can choose to let it go and do something about it, or I can choose to let them grow. It's much easier now than it was when I was 20 or 30 or 40. See? But that's the wisdom and the way God has created things for us. God's not codependent. God's not going to do it for you. You grow up as a human being with that which is nurturing and that which is good, and you also grow up with that which is evil. Now, some of that which is evil in us was thrust upon us. I had no choice what part of the country I was born in. I had no choice of what my relatives said about African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement. I inherited all that. I inherited bigotry and prejudice and homophobia. I inherited all of those things. However, when I started to personally see the truth, I had to make a choice as to what I was going to hold on to, you see. And it took time, but I'm thankful that I did, because my world is much richer for it being full of every kind of human being that I know. And that which is toxic, I now have learned to say goodbye to. People sometimes marvel. The Windermere Union Church never fights. You guys never argue. There aren't clans against other clans and factions against other factions trying to destroy one another and trying to seize power. That's unheard of. That's fake news. It's not. What's the difference? There are toxic people who come into this congregation, into this community. They're very toxic. And one or two things will happen. When they come here with the toxicity, we find a way to still embrace and love them, and the toxicity wanes and goes away. Or if they remain toxic, we choose not to dance with them and their toxic lives. And they get frustrated and they leave and find another community that will dance. You see, that's the way it works with toxicity. It needs a partner. Right? It takes two to tango. It takes two to be toxic. And if you choose not to dance and engage with the toxicity and love anyway, eventually the toxicity will be reformed and replaced, or it will find another place to go and do its thing. That's the power of maturity. We're a mature congregation, so we have the capacity to do that, rather than jumping up every time somebody says something or does something we don't like, and then we have to form some kind of grand crusade around it, you see? I love that about you. I love that, because what that does then is allow us to do what? To minister. So, what are the weeds in your life? They've grown up with that which is beautiful about you. What are the toxic things in your life? What are the fake news that you hear about yourself every day? Not from out there anymore, because now it's all coming from here. You're inadequate somehow. You don't measure up. Who you are is somehow flawed because of sexual orientation or the color of your skin or what kind of accent you have when you speak. What's the fake news that you fill yourself up with each and every day? That, as you know now, as people of faith and people who are part of a mature community, you know now are lies. Did God create you to be flawed? Did God create you somehow to be lesser than? Thank you. And when we choose to stop believing the fake news about ourselves, when we choose to start letting the mature part of us discover, you know, who I am is pretty wonderful. You know what? I realize that I'm much stronger than I ever believed. I don't need to be so afraid anymore. Gosh, with my experience in life, I have within me wisdom and knowledge to handle about any situation that comes, and I have enough life experience now to know that when bad things come that are outside of my experience, I'm going to be able to deal with them. It always works out, does it not? It works out, does it? Yes, that's called maturity. That which is so where are you going to put your focus and your energy? Are you going to put it in the toxins, or are you going to put it into that which grows and nurtures? That's our responsibility. It's just like today, in a macro sense, it's your responsibility to get the news and to learn the facts. You have to do it on your own now because you're bombarded from many different sources. But it's also true that it's up to you to figure out what is real and what is toxic in your own life. And know that, and letting it go, it's going to be so much better than to continue to plant it and nurture it in your life. Because you cannot shine when you're lesser than. You can't fulfill and contribute to society when you feel that somehow you are flawed. It's only when you're being your truest self, your most mature self, and you focus your energy on that which nurtures and feeds yourself and the world around you, that then truly you start becoming the human being that God created you to be. So what's toxic? You know what it is. You've already started making your list while I was talking. What's toxic? What are the weeds that are choking out what you're trying to produce in this life? What is it? What are they? What are you going to do about it? Well, they've been growing there for a long, long time. I don't know what to do. Guess what? There are people who can help you. I'm one of them. Stephen's ministers can help you. And if I can't help you, I know a lot of other people who can. So sometimes we have to start by bringing in a gardener who will help us with the tools to let the weeds go. So I see this parable as a warning against severe methods of moral crusades and closing ourselves off. But I also see it as a parable that speaks to us as individuals. That as we mature, where are we going to focus our energy? What becomes real in our lives? The lies that we were bestowed upon us when we were growing up, or do we have the courage to figure it out for ourselves in the midst of a safe community? The wheat and the weeds. What are you going to do? I think we all have some gardening ahead of us today and for the rest of our lives. Thus ends the lesson. Let us pray.